Officer Wilson drags the bloodied black man into the station, throwing him into a cell. "Another worthless vagrant," he spits. The homeless man waits until alone, then whispers into his ragged sleeve. "Director, I've identified all officers involved in the racial profiling operation. They just gave me access to everything." Before we dive into this shocking story of deception and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you're ready to uncover police corruption that targeted an entire black community, hit that like button and subscribe now. How far would you go to expose the truth when the entire system is against you? Let's find out in this incredible true story. Marcus Jenkins stood before Director Calloway in the austere conference room at FBI headquarters, his resolute expression masking the apprehension churning in his stomach. The wall-mounted screens displayed horrifying statistics: 17 black men and women dead in police custody in Oak Ridge County. Over the past 3 years, hundreds of suspicious arrests with excessive force and countless reports of harassment against black residents. "This pattern isn't coincidental," Director Calloway stated, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We need someone on the inside, someone they won't see coming." Marcus nodded, already knowing he would volunteer. As one of the Bureau's few black agents with extensive undercover experience, he recognized this mission wasn't just an assignment, it was personal. "I'll do it," he said, his deep voice unwavering, despite understanding the dangers ahead. The transformation from Special Agent Marcus Jenkins to Elijah Washington, homeless veteran with mental health issues, was painstaking and comprehensive. Marcus surrendered his clean-shaven appearance, growing a wild beard, while deliberately losing 20 pounds from his athletic frame. The FBI's behavioral specialists coached him on displaying signs of PTSD and schizophrenia, conditions cruelly common among forgotten veterans. They crafted a detailed backstory: honorable service in Afghanistan, subsequent trauma-failed treatment at the VA, lost job, foreclosed home, and ultimately the streets. During preparation, Marcus studied the geography and demographics of Oak Ridge thoroughly. On paper, the suburban town appeared idyllic: manicured lawns, excellent schools, and low official crime rates. But beneath this veneer lay a stark racial divide. Affluent white neighborhoods in the western and central districts contrasted sharply with the predominantly black eastern district, where police presence was oppressively heavy. The mission began on a crisp autumn morning as an unmarked van dropped Marcus near the Oak Ridge city limits. Dressed in layers of tattered clothes, carrying only a worn backpack containing hidden surveillance equipment, disguised as ordinary items, he shuffled into town, already feeling the weight of invisibility that came with his new identity. For the first week, Marcus simply established his presence, sleeping in alleyways or under the Highway 16 overpass, accepting occasional meals from a community kitchen and carefully observing police patrol patterns. He quickly noticed the stark difference in how officers behaved in different neighborhoods. In white areas, police were respectful and courteous, often stopping to chat with residents. But crossing into the Eastern District transformed them entirely. Marcus witnessed Officer Ryan Wilson and Sergeant Thomas Cooper stopping black teenagers without cause, aggressively searching them while hurling racial slurs. Outside the Gospel Lights convenience store, a black-owned business, he observed Cooper pressuring the owner for protection money, with thinly veiled threats about finding health code violations. Each night, Marcus meticulously documented everything in his hidden recording devices, speaking softly into a microphone concealed within a tattered scarf. His reports were transmitted during brief encrypted bursts to a distant FBI receiver. The psychological toll of living on the streets hit harder than Marcus had anticipated. The constant exposure to the elements left him perpetually cold and damp. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the dangers that prowled the night. Most challenging was the dehumanization, being treated as invisible by most passers-by, or worse, as a nuisance or threat. White women clutched their purses tighter when he approached. Store owners immediately asked him to leave, police cruisers slowed menacingly when passing. On his 10th day in Oak Ridge, Marcus encountered Shanice Taylor outside her small community outreach center. Unlike others, she looked him directly in the eyes when offering a sandwich and coffee. "You're new around here." She observed her warm voice carrying both compassion and wariness. "I run the shelter on Martin Luther King Boulevard if you need a place some nights." Marcus mumbled a thank you, maintaining his cover while noting her interaction with other homeless individuals she knew most by name. Later, he discovered she was documenting police abuses against the homeless and black residents, making her a potentially valuable contact. His investigation proceeded smoothly until day 14, when disaster nearly struck. While shuffling past the courthouse, a middle-aged white woman did a double-take, her eyes widening in recognition. "Agent Jenkins," she began uncertainly. Marcus recognized her Angela Hoffman, a witness he'd protected in a previous case. Thinking quickly, he lurched toward her, rambling incoherently about government surveillance and aliens, causing her to back away in alarm. Unfortunately, this performance attracted the attention of a passing patrol car. Officer Wilson approached, hand already on his baton. "What seems to be the problem here?" he demanded, eyeing Marcus with disgust. The confrontation ended with Marcus face down on the pavement, handcuffed and thrown into the back of a squad car for disturbing the peace. At the station, this seeming setback became an opportunity. Placed in a holding cell, Marcus exaggerated his mental instability, rocking back and forth while muttering about conspiracies. The officers, believing him to be just another crazy homeless person, spoke freely nearby. "Got another one of those Eastern District specials." Wilson laughed to the booking officer. "Make sure he gets the usual accommodations." The conversation revealed a coded system for handling black detainees. Eastern District specials received no phone calls, delayed processing, and often resisted arrest before being released. Marcus absorbed every word, memorizing names, procedures, and the casual cruelty with which they discussed human beings. His first arrest had yielded more intelligence than weeks of external observation could have provided. Released after 24 hours without charges, Marcus returned to the streets with a new shadow. Sergeant Cooper had taken notice of him, instructing patrol officers to keep an eye on the crazy homeless guy. This unwanted attention complicated his mission, but also confirmed he was positioned where the corruption was most visible. During the following weeks, Marcus penetrated deeper into the Oak Ridge Police Department's operations by strategically placing himself near evidence transfers and shift changes. He discovered a disturbing pattern of evidence tampering in cases involving black defendants. Outside the courthouse, he observed Officer Wilson passing a small package to Lieutenant James Franklin, who managed the evidence room. Later that day, a young black man was convicted of possession with intent to distribute, despite his vehement claims that the drugs weren't his. Marcus documented at least 12 similar instances over 3 weeks, establishing a clear pattern of planted evidence. Through careful observation and strategic eavesdropping, Marcus identified the key players in this corrupt system. At the top sat Chief Robert Hansen, a silver-haired veteran with political connections reaching to the state capitol, who provided cover and protection from external scrutiny. Lieutenant Franklin controlled physical evidence, ensuring anything incriminating against officers disappeared, while manufacturing evidence against targeted citizens. Officer Wilson served as the department's brutal enforcer, specializing in street corrections that left no visible marks. Perhaps most disturbing was Officer Sarah Miller, whose innocent appearance belied her role in falsifying reports and witness statements to match the department's narrative. The corruption extended beyond ordinary racism into organized criminal behavior. Following Officer Cooper one evening, Marcus found himself at the edge of town, where a meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse. Through a broken window, he photographed several Oak Ridge officers in civilian clothes, mingling with known members of the Patriot Front, a white supremacist group responsible for escalating racial tensions across the state. The officers weren't there to investigate. They were active participants sharing information about Black community events and discussing problem individuals who needed to be taught lessons. Marcus was documenting this meeting when he heard a commotion nearby. Peering around the corner, he witnessed Officer Wilson and two other officers surrounding a Black teenager. The boy, dressed in basketball shorts and carrying a gym bag, was simply walking home from practice. "What's a boy like you doing in this neighborhood?" Wilson demanded deliberately, scuffing the teen's clean sneakers with his boot. "I live 2 blocks away, sir." The boy, who Marcus later identified as Deshaun Robinson, responded respectfully, keeping his hands visible. "Sure you do," Wilson sneered, nodding to the other officers who began roughly searching him. When they emptied his gym bag onto the ground, Deshaun made the mistake of protesting. "You need a warrant for that." Wilson's response was immediate and violent, a baton strike to Deshaun's legs that sent him sprawling. Marcus knew intervening would blow his cover and compromise the entire investigation, potentially leaving these officers unpunished. Instead, he created a strategic distraction, knocking over trash cans down the alley and howling like a man in the midst of a psychotic break. The diversion worked. 2 officers moved toward the noise, giving Deshaun the opportunity to break free and run. Wilson pursued briefly before deciding the teenager wasn't worth the effort. The next day, Marcus observed Deshaun's parents at the police station attempting to file a complaint. The desk sergeant smiled politely, took their statement, and assured them it would be thoroughly investigated. As soon as they left, he dropped the form into a shredder, exchanging knowing looks with another officer. Marcus ensured evidence of both the incident and the destroyed complaint reached his FBI handler through his encrypted communications. The department's corruption had systems within systems. During another strategic arrest, this time for loitering near the station, Marcus discovered their coded language system for targeting Black residents. Code Sunshine meant fabricating a reason to pull over vehicles with Black drivers. Gardening duty referred to planting evidence. Most disturbing was midnight training, which officers used to describe taking suspects to remote locations for beatings that wouldn't appear on official records. The physical toll of Marcus's undercover work intensified. His once robust frame had become gaunt, his skin weathered from constant exposure. A persistent cough had developed from sleeping in damp conditions, and the psychological strain of maintaining his cover while witnessing daily injustices left him exhausted. Yet each new discovery reinforced his determination to see the mission through. His investigation reached a critical juncture when he observed Judge William Carpenter dismissing a clear case of police brutality despite video evidence from a bystander's phone. The victim, a Black woman named Tanya Lewis, had been thrown to the ground during a traffic stop, sustaining a broken wrist. The judge cited officer safety concerns before suppressing the video and dismissing the case. Later that same day, Marcus spotted Judge Carpenter and Chief Hansen sharing drinks at an exclusive country club outside town, limits their conversation intimate and conspiratorial. The corruption wasn't limited to the police department, it had infected the entire justice system in Oak Ridge County. What happens when those sworn to protect become the greatest threat to an entire community? How does systematic oppression change the way people live their daily lives? If you've ever witnessed injustice and felt powerless, comment number 1 below. If you believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law regardless of skin color, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of justice prevailing against overwhelming odds. Now, what would you do if your child was killed by those wearing a badge and no one would listen? Let's continue this shocking true story. As winter settled over Oak Ridge, Marcus became a familiar figure among the homeless community. The shared struggle for survival, finding warm places to sleep, securing meals, avoiding harassment, forged bonds that gave him access to stories rarely heard by those in authority. The homeless, particularly those of color, witnessed everything while remaining invisible to most of society. They became Marcus's most valuable intelligence network, sharing observations about which officers to avoid and which businesses would call the police immediately upon seeing a black face. Through these connections, Marcus met Lamar Johnson one frigid evening at the community soup kitchen. The middle-aged man's eyes held a hollowness that spoke of loss beyond measure. "My boy would have been 22 next month," Lamar shared quietly after several interactions had built tentative trust. James was just driving home from his night shift. Taillight was out. The story emerged in painful fragments. Officer Wilson had pulled over Lamar's son for the minor infraction, but the situation escalated when James questioned why he needed to exit his vehicle. The official report claimed James reached for something, prompting Wilson to fire 8 shots. "They said the body cam malfunctioned," Lamar whispered, hands trembling around his styrofoam cup. 8 shots for a taillight. Marcus learned that the department had ruled the shooting justified in less than 48 hours, with the corrupted footage conveniently supporting Wilson's account. Lamar had lost his job while seeking justice, eventually losing his home as well. The system hadn't just taken his son. It had systematically dismantled his entire life. Shanice Taylor's community outreach expanded beyond providing basic necessities. Marcus discovered she hosted secret meetings where residents documented their experiences with police misconduct. Initially viewed with suspicion, his consistent presence and Lamar's vouching eventually earned him access to these gatherings held in the basement of Shanice's small outreach center. "We need records they can't destroy," Shanice explained to the group of 30 or so community members. "Every interaction, every threat, every time they follow our children home from school, document it all." Marcus observed her methodical approach, collecting sworn statements, photographs of injuries and timestamps that could corroborate patterns of harassment. His admiration for her courage grew complicated by guilt at his necessary deception. The stories he heard during these meetings haunted his dreams. Mothers described children afraid to play outside for fear of police. Fathers detailed humiliating public searches while their families watched helplessly. Elderly residents recounted being denied medical attention while in custody for minor infractions or mistaken identities. Marcus struggled with his inability to immediately help, knowing that premature action might compromise the larger goal of dismantling the entire corrupt system. His inner conflict reached a breaking point when he witnessed a coordinated police operation targeting Eastwood Heights, the predominantly black housing project. Under the guise of a drug sweep, officers stormed apartments without warrants, claiming anonymous tips and exigent circumstances. Marcus observed the operation from a discreet distance, documenting Officer Miller deliberately changing witness statements on her report. When a white resident mentioned seeing some white boys selling pills by the basketball court, Miller recorded it as several black males engaged in narcotics transactions. Marcus managed to photograph this falsification using a concealed camera disguised as a button on his tattered coat. Through careful eavesdropping and strategic positioning near the station's back entrance, where officers smoked, Marcus uncovered the department's quota system. A whiteboard in the break room tracked arrests by neighborhood with Eastern District numbers highlighted and tied directly to performance reviews and promotion opportunities. Officers who failed to meet these targets faced unfavorable assignments and schedule changes. The system created powerful incentives to manufacture charges against black residents. A new player entered the dynamic when Andre Williams, a young black lawyer who had recently returned to his hometown, began asking questions about pattern discrepancies in arrest records. Marcus observed him methodically requesting public records and interviewing released defendants about their experiences. Andre's Harvard law degree and meticulous approach made him harder for the department to dismiss, though they quickly marked him as a threat. Need to find something on that uppity lawyer. Marcus overheard Cooper telling Wilson while pretending to sleep on a bench near the courthouse. Everyone's got dirt. Dig deeper. Recognizing the danger to Andre, Marcus engineered several seemingly chance encounters during which he rambled incoherently, but included specific warnings embedded within his apparent delusions. The Eagles watch from the rooftops with cameras, he muttered when Andre offered him a coffee one morning. Never drive alone after midnight in this town, especially not on River Road where there's no witnesses. Andre's confused expression shifted subtly to understanding. The apparent homeless man was telling him something important. The tensions culminated in a town hall meeting where Chief Hansen masterfully deflected all accusations of racial bias. Our department reflects the diversity of our community, he declared, gesturing to the 3 black officers strategically positioned in the front row, officers who worked desk jobs and were never involved in patrol decisions. We respond to criminal behavior, not race. From his position at the back of the hall, Marcus observed which officials nodded approvingly at Hansen's lies and which shifted uncomfortably. He noted the mayor's enthusiastic support, the county commissioner's rehearsed questions, and the nervous glances between Judge Carpenter and Lieutenant Franklin when a community member mentioned missing evidence. Most importantly, he watched Shanice methodically recording every false statement, her quiet determination more powerful than the loudest protests. That night, updating his handler from a secluded location behind the abandoned paper mill, Marcus summarized the extent of the conspiracy. This isn't just a few bad officers. It's systematic corruption extending to every level of local government, deliberately targeting black citizens as a matter of policy. The response was immediate. Continue gathering evidence. We need an airtight case that can't be dismissed by friendly judges. Authorization granted for extended deployment. Marcus ended the transmission knowing the most dangerous phase of his mission was just beginning. Marcus realized something had changed the moment Sergeant Cooper's cruiser slowed beside him for the 3rd time that day. The officer's gaze held none of the usual contempt reserved for the homeless. Instead, his eyes narrowed with focused suspicion. "Hey, Washington," Cooper called, using the fake name Marcus had given during his arrests. "You seem to turn up everywhere interesting lately." The casual observation carried unmistakable threat. Marcus had maintained his cover flawlessly for months, but something had triggered Cooper's instincts. Later that evening, huddled in his hidden observation spot near the station's rear entrance, Marcus overheard Cooper talking with Officer Wilson. "Something's off about that homeless guy. Palmer swears he saw him writing something when he thought no one was looking, not the random scribbles these nutcases usually make organized notes." Marcus immediately implemented counter-surveillance protocols, enhancing his performance as an unstable homeless person. He increased his seemingly random movements, spoke loudly to himself on street corners, and displayed more pronounced tremors in his hands. When approached by officers, he reacted with exaggerated fear or inappropriate laughter. Internally, however, he calculated his next move with precision. The following day, Marcus deliberately created an incident guaranteed to result in arrest. Outside the police station, he engaged in an apparent argument with a fire hydrant growing increasingly agitated until he was shouting incoherently about government conspiracies. The performance worked perfectly. Within minutes, 2 officers dragged him inside, roughly depositing him in the now familiar holding cell. "Got your frequent visitor card filled up yet, Washington?" Officer Miller smirked as she completed the intake form. "One more stay, and you earn a free night in our luxury accommodations." Once alone in the cell, Marcus experienced firsthand the department's special treatment for black suspects. No water was provided despite his requests. Officers walking past freely used racial slurs, seeming to enjoy his apparent distress. When he asked to make a phone call, Wilson laughed. "Who you gonna call homeless man, the ghost of Martin Luther King?" Several hours into his detention, Marcus overheard a crucial conversation between Cooper and Chief Hansen outside his cell. "The raid on Good Shepherd Church is approved for Friday night," Cooper reported. "Judge Carpenter signed off on the warrant based on our CI's statement about drug activity." Hansen's response was calculated. "Make sure it happens during their community meeting. Shanice Taylor and her troublemakers need to learn what happens when they stir up complaints against this department." Marcus maintained his vacant expression while internally processing the implications. Good Shepherd was where Shanice held her documentation meetings. The confidential informant was certainly fabricated the drug claims manufactured to justify shutting down the community's organizing efforts. He needed to get this information to his handler immediately and find a way to warn the church without compromising his cover. In the adjacent cell, another detainee caught Marcus's attention. A young black man with swollen eyes and dried blood on his temple. Through subtle communication, Marcus learned he was Kevin Washington, arrested for allegedly running a stop sign and then resisting arrest. The injuries told a different story. "I didn't resist," Kevin whispered when the guards were out of earshot. "Dashcam will show it. I kept my hands on the wheel just like my dad taught me." Marcus doubted the dashcam footage would ever see the light of day, but he needed documentation of Kevin's injuries. When an officer briefly left the booking area unattended, Marcus used the moment to create a distraction by faking a seizure. In the ensuing confusion, he managed to activate his hidden camera while appearing to flail uncontrollably, capturing clear images of Kevin's injuries. Released the following morning with a warning, Marcus faced the challenge of warning the church community while maintaining his cover. He couldn't approach Shanice directly. Cooper had officers watching her. Instead, he employed indirect methods, shuffling past community members and muttering seemingly nonsensical warnings that contained crucial information. "Shepherds aren't safe when wolves come Friday night wearing badges instead of fur." He repeated variations of this message to several people connected to Shanice's group, hoping the pattern would be recognized. His investigation took another dark turn when he followed Officer Wilson after his shift. Instead of heading home, Wilson drove to an isolated storage facility on the outskirts of town. Using his surveillance training, Marcus observed Wilson removing packages from his trunk. Packages identical to those confiscated in drug arrests earlier that day. The officer was clearly skimming seized contraband for personal profit. Marcus documented the entire transaction, including Wilson's meeting with local dealers who paid him cash for the stolen drugs and weapons. The risks intensified when Cooper and Wilson cornered Marcus in an alley behind the Eastern District convenience store. "You know what I realized, Washington," Cooper said, tapping his baton against his palm. "Every time something happens with our department, you seem to be shuffling around nearby. That's one hell of a coincidence." Marcus maintained his character, mumbling about needing his medication and avoiding eye contact. "I think you might need some special help remembering to mind your own business," Wilson added, pulling on leather gloves. What followed was a calculated beating, careful to avoid visible facial injuries, but delivering excruciating pain to Marcus's ribs and kidneys. "Consider this professional courtesy," Cooper whispered, as Marcus lay gasping on the ground. "Next time, you disappear permanently." As they walked away, Marcus knew his cover was dangerously close to being blown. Despite the pain radiating through his body, he activated his emergency transmitter, sending a priority signal to his handler. "Cover compromised. Surveillance increased. Critical threat to community imminent. Require immediate extraction options." The response came hours later, hidden in a dropped newspaper near his usual sleeping spot. "Maintain position. Backup protocols initiated. Priority on evidence preservation. Medical extraction available if necessary. Marcus discarded the paper after memorizing the message. Despite the option to exit, he decided to continue. He was close to breaking the case wide open, and the threat to Shanice and her community required his continued presence. That night, sheltering in an abandoned building and nursing his injuries, Marcus reviewed his situation. The corruption ran deeper than initially suspected, the danger was escalating rapidly, and his body was reaching its physical limits. Yet he remained resolute. This wasn't just an assignment anymore. It was a moral imperative to bring justice to a community systematically terrorized by those sworn to protect them. Despite throbbing pain from his injuries, Marcus rose before dawn the next day, knowing his investigation needed to accelerate. Cooper and Wilson's suspicions meant his time was limited, requiring him to focus on the financial aspects of corruption, the evidence most likely to secure convictions. Following a hunch, Marcus positioned himself near the town's most prestigious bank, appearing to panhandle, while actually observing patterns of visits by department officials. Chief Hansen arrived precisely at 9:30 every third Tuesday, spending exactly 12 minutes inside, before emerging with a small leather portfolio. This regularity suggested something more significant than routine banking. Through careful social engineering, mumbling that he had found a wallet while approaching bank employees on their smoke breaks, Marcus learned that the bank's third floor housed representatives from Cayman Islands financial institutions who served exclusive clientele. Cross-referencing dates of Hansen's visits with case dismissals revealed a pattern. Major cases against wealthy white defendants were typically thrown out by Judge Carpenter within 48 hours of these banking visits. Marcus needed someone with legal access to financial records, someone already investigating the department, but with legitimate authority. Andre Williams was the obvious choice, but approaching him directly carried significant risks. Instead, Marcus crafted anonymous tips carefully structured to guide Andre's investigation without revealing the source. He left a note under the windshield of Andre's car containing only an account number and the words, "Check deposits against case dismissal dates." His next step required access to Shanice, who had been actively monitoring his absence since the beating. Appearing at the community center with visible difficulty walking, Marcus allowed Shanice to guide him to a back room where she kept basic medical supplies. "Those animals," she muttered, helping him remove his tattered jacket to reveal extensive bruising. "Cooper and Wilson." Marcus nodded, maintaining his cover, while allowing this moment of honest connection. "They're planning something at Good Shepherd," he whispered, pretending to be delirious with pain. "Friday night. Something about drugs and a raid." Shanice's hands stilled on the bandage she was applying. "How do you know this?" "Heard them talking when they thought I was knocked out." Marcus replied the partial truth, making his deception more bearable. As Shanice treated his injuries, Marcus struggled with growing feelings that complicated his mission. Her compassion, courage, and intelligence commanded his admiration. In another context, he would have pursued a relationship, but his current deception created an unbridgeable gap. Every kind word she offered intensified his guilt, yet he couldn't reveal his true identity without endangering both her and the investigation. While recovering, Marcus identified a critical connection between the department's selective enforcement and a major drug trafficking operation. White neighborhoods saw virtually no drug arrests, despite active dealing in certain areas, while black residents faced immediate arrest for minor possession. Following Officer Wilson one evening led Marcus to discover why the department had an arrangement with the Brennan family, who controlled narcotics distribution throughout the county. In exchange for operating freely in affluent neighborhoods and providing kickbacks to key officers, the department targeted competing dealers in the Eastern District and provided intelligence on federal investigations. This discovery explained how drugs seized in arrests often disappeared from evidence, they were being recycled back into the Brennan distribution network. Marcus documented a meeting between Lieutenant Franklin and Patrick Brennan at an isolated lakeside cabin, capturing images of money changing hands and coordinates of competing operations being shared. The existence of deleted body cam footage presented another opportunity. Marcus had observed Lieutenant Franklin systematically erasing recordings that showed excessive force or procedural violations. During another strategic arrest, this time for interfering with police business, when he accidentally wandered into the background of a traffic stop, Marcus managed to create a distraction in the station by faking a medical emergency. In the momentary confusion, he gained brief access to an unlocked computer terminal where he inserted a disguised flash drive containing specialized FBI software that created a backdoor into the department's digital evidence system. This intrusion, while risky, provided access to deleted footage that Franklin believed was permanently erased. Through this backdoor, Marcus's FBI team recovered dozens of incidents showing clear civil rights violations. The investigation reached a critical turning point when Marcus learned of an imminent threat through his network of homeless informants. Tommy, a veteran who often slept near the station's parking lot, overheard Cooper and Hansen discussing plans for a massive raid targeting community leaders. "They're gonna plant enough evidence to put Shanice and the others away for decades," Tommy explained, sharing his bottle of cheap wine with Marcus as cover for their conversation. Talking about finding guns and drugs in all their homes on the same night. The timing aligned with increased activity. Marcus had observed officers preparing raid gear. Unusual meetings between Hansen and Judge Carpenter and Wilson, making multiple trips to the storage facility where he kept stolen contraband. With the threat imminent and multiple lives at stake, Marcus made the difficult decision to partially reveal himself to Andre. Approaching the lawyer's office after hours, Marcus shed his homeless persona long enough to demonstrate his true nature. "I'm not who I appear to be," he said, standing straight and speaking clearly for the first time in months. "I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you that your suspicions about the department are correct, and I have evidence." Andre's initial shock gave way to cautious cooperation as Marcus shared just enough information to help protect the community without compromising his broader mission. "There will be a raid Friday night targeting Shanice and others. They're planting evidence as we speak. You need to file emergency injunctions citing procedural concerns based on these case precedents." Marcus provided Andre with case numbers that his FBI team had identified as relevant without revealing his bureau connection. "Why should I trust you?" Andre asked reasonably. Marcus removed his ragged beanie, meeting Andre's eyes directly. "Because like you, I believe justice matters. And because what's happening here isn't just corrupt, it's evil." Their unlikely alliance formed just in time as Marcus's surveillance confirmed the raid preparations were accelerating. The department had already fabricated witness statements and obtained warrants based on false information. Hansen had scheduled additional officers from neighboring jurisdictions to ensure overwhelming force. As Marcus left Andre's office, resuming his homeless shuffling gait, before reaching the street, he knew the investigation had reached its most dangerous phase. The evidence he had gathered was substantial, but still not enough to guarantee convictions of all involved parties. And now, with Cooper actively suspicious and the raid approaching, the timeline had compressed dramatically. That night, in his secure communication with his FBI handler, Marcus transmitted everything he had gathered about the planned raid. The response was sobering. "Insufficient grounds for federal intervention pre-raid. Continue monitoring. Preserve evidence at all costs. Extraction team on standby." Translation: they needed to catch the department in the act of civil rights violations to build an airtight federal case. The community would face the raid, but Marcus would ensure those responsible would ultimately face justice. His final action that night was to leave an anonymous tip with a state-level judge known for integrity warning of potential evidence planting in Oak Ridge County. It wasn't enough to stop what was coming, but it might create additional scrutiny that could help protect the innocent. What would you do if you were falsely accused of a crime you didn't commit? How would you feel if the people sworn to uphold justice were the same ones framing you? Comment number 1. If you believe our justice system needs greater accountability. Or number 2, if you think cases like this are just rare exceptions. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories where truth eventually prevails against corruption. Now, what happens when an FBI agent's cover is at risk of being blown while innocent lives hang in the balance? Let's continue this shocking story. Despite Andre's legal maneuvers, the department executed its plan with brutal efficiency. The raid on Good Shepherd Church occurred precisely as Marcus had warned, with officers storming in during Shanice's community meeting, weapons drawn, and shouting contradictory commands. Marcus strategically positioned nearby to document the operation, found himself swept up in the mass arrests when Officer Wilson spotted him and deliberately targeted him for detention. "Got your friend too," Wilson sneered at Shanice as another officer zip-tied Marcus's hands behind his back with punishing tightness. "Found this in his pocket." He held up a small bag of white powder that Marcus knew with absolute certainty had been planted. At the station, the processing area resembled a wartime detention center. 37 community members sat handcuffed on the floor, while officers discovered additional contraband in their personal belongings. Marcus observed Officer Miller methodically moving from bag to bag, surreptitiously planting evidence while maintaining a perfect performance of surprise discovery for the body cams. The department's confidence in their immunity from consequences was apparent in their barely concealed smirks and casual high-fives between arrests. Chief Hansen personally supervised Marcus's interrogation, a clear indication that his cover had drawn significant suspicion. "So, Mr. Washington." Hansen began circling the metal table where Marcus sat handcuffed. "Or should I call you something else? Because my officers have noticed some interesting things about you." Marcus maintained his homeless veteran persona, flawlessly alternating between apparent confusion, paranoid muttering, and thousand-yard stares suggestive of PTSD episodes. When questioned directly, he responded with rambling conspiracies about government mind control and surveillance through dental fillings. "You're good." Hansen conceded after 2 hours of psychological pressure yielded nothing. "But everyone breaks eventually." He nodded to Officer Wilson, who immediately understood the unspoken command. Left alone with Wilson, Marcus endured calculated intimidation designed to break his cover without leaving evidence of misconduct. Wilson never struck him, instead employing stress positions, threats against Shanice and others, and psychological tactics like describing in detail how homeless suspects occasionally died of natural causes in Oak Ridge custody. Throughout this ordeal, Marcus absorbed critical intelligence. The officers' conversations revealed the full extent of their separate justice systems. White detainees received prompt processing phone calls and often released without bail for similar charges. Black detainees faced extended holding periods without formal booking, deliberate computer errors that delayed their appearances before judges, and excessive bail amounts for minor infractions. Marcus witnessed Officer Franklin instructing the booking clerk to lose the paperwork on 3 black teenagers for several hours, ensuring they would miss the day's bail hearings and spend the weekend in custody. Through the holding cell grapevine, Marcus learned that Andre was working frantically to secure legal representation for everyone arrested. The young lawyer had called in colleagues from his former firm in the state capital, creating a team of attorneys who demanded access to the detainees. The department stonewalled these efforts, citing ongoing investigations and processing delays to justify denying constitutional rights. Recognizing the increasing danger of his position, Marcus needed to get an urgent message to his FBI handler. During a bathroom break under Wilson's supervision, he managed to create a momentary distraction by appearing to have a seizure. In the brief seconds while Wilson called for assistance, Marcus activated his emergency transmitter, tapping out a coded message: "Mass civil rights violations in progress. 37 detained illegally. Evidence being planted. Cover critically compromised." The transmission lasted only seconds, but the risk was necessary. The response came through an unexpected channel. A junior officer Marcus hadn't seen before delivered dinner trays to the cells, whispering as he passed Marcus. "Handler received message. Hold position. Documentation priority." The infiltration confirmed the FBI was moving pieces into place, but Marcus would need to maintain his cover while gathering final evidence. The most chilling discovery came at 3 a.m., when Marcus overheard Cooper and Franklin discussing him outside his cell. "Hansen wants the problem solved permanently," Cooper said, his voice barely audible. "Thinks our homeless friend knows too much." Franklin sounded nervous. "Suicide in custody. That brings investigations." "Not if it's convincing," Cooper replied. "Found hanging with a confession note about planting evidence against himself. Blame the drugs in his system. Case closed." The conversation confirmed what Marcus had suspected: they planned to kill him and stage it as suicide, eliminating a potential witness while discrediting any evidence that might be traced back to him. Survival now depended on preventing isolation. Marcus needed to ensure regular checks by officers not directly involved in the conspiracy. He identified Officer Sarah Miller as his best option. She participated in the corruption, but had shown occasional hesitation, particularly when violence was involved. When she passed his cell on rotation, Marcus employed his training in behavioral psychology. "My sister has your smile," he said softly as she performed a routine check. "She's a nurse in Cincinnati, helps people like me get their meds." The personal connection, combined with the implication that someone cared about his whereabouts, hit its mark. Miller paused momentarily, seeing the human being, rather than just another homeless drug addict. "I'll check on you again in an hour," she said, her voice carrying a hint of compassion that might prove life-saving. Through careful observation between feigned sleep, Marcus learned that Shanice was being held in solitary confinement, an unusual procedure for her minor charges. Officer Wilson's comments to another officer revealed why. "Chief says she stays in isolation until she agrees to shut down her little community center and stop filing complaints. Otherwise, we find more serious charges every few days. Maybe some assault on an officer this time." The systematic effort to silence her crystallized everything Marcus had documented about the department's operations. They weren't just corrupt, they were actively working to dismantle any community resistance to their authority. As dawn approached on his second day in custody, Marcus finalized his contingency plan. The department intended to transfer him to an interview room, without cameras during the shift. Change the perfect opportunity for his suicide. He had identified 3 possible escape routes, calculated officer rotation patterns, and located the records room where physical evidence of the department's corruption would be stored. When 2 officers he didn't recognize approached his cell during the quietest hour of the night shift, Marcus recognized his moment had arrived. "Special interview for you," one said, unlocking the cell while the other stood with a taser ready. "Chief has some more questions." Instead of resisting, Marcus appeared to comply, shuffling forward with his head down. As they passed the darkened break room, he executed his plan with precision, born of years of training. A stumble, a seeming seizure, and then explosive movement as he disabled both officers with targeted strikes to pressure points. Neither had a chance to radio for help. Moving with silent efficiency that would have shocked those who knew only his homeless persona, Marcus secured the officers with their own handcuffs and zip ties, using their keycards to access the records room. He had exactly 4 minutes before the next scheduled radio check would raise alarms. The records room yielded everything he needed. Physical evidence logs showing systematic falsification folders marked insurance, containing planted evidence ready for future use, and most critically, a logbook documenting the special handling of black suspects with explicit racial coding. Using his concealed equipment, Marcus photographed everything before slipping back into the darkened hallways of the station. Rather than attempting to leave the building, which would trigger immediate pursuit, Marcus utilized his knowledge of the station's blind spots to relocate to the building's rarely used storage basement. From this hiding place, he could monitor movement patterns while planning his next move. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had come to investigate corruption only to be labeled a criminal himself. Now, as both hunter and hunted within the station's walls, he needed to complete his mission while evading those who planned his death. 3 days after his escape from custody, Marcus met his FBI handler at a predetermined emergency location 50 miles from Oak Ridge. Agent Diana Chen's expression shifted from professional concern to shock as she took in his physical condition. "Jenkins, you need medical attention immediately," she insisted, noting his weight loss, untreated injuries, and the lingering cough that punctuated his breathing. "I need to finish this first," Marcus countered, connecting his devices to secure bureau laptops. "They're actively destroying evidence as we speak." For the next 4 hours, they systematically transferred and categorized everything Marcus had gathered: photographs of planted evidence, recordings of officers discussing falsified reports, documentation of the beating of black suspects, financial records showing suspicious deposits to offshore accounts, and the network connecting the department to both white supremacist groups and drug traffickers. "This is the most comprehensive case of departmental corruption I've ever seen," Chen admitted, organizing the files for the prosecutorial team. "But we need more time to build an airtight case that the U.S. attorney can take to a grand jury. Some of this evidence would be challenged on chain of custody grounds." "How long?" Marcus asked, knowing that each day allowed the corruption to continue claiming more victims. 2 weeks minimum," Chen replied. "We need to place our own people in position, secure judicial authorization for additional surveillance, and ensure we can prosecute everyone involved, not just the officers on the street." The decision weighing on Marcus felt impossible. His body desperately needed recovery time, yet the community remained in immediate danger. "I'm going back in," he announced, ignoring Chen's objections. "Cooper and Hansen think I've fled the jurisdiction. They won't be looking for me to return." "Marcus, you've done enough," Chen argued. "Let our fresh operatives take over. Your cover is compromised and your health is deteriorating." Marcus shook his head with grim determination. "No new operative can build the community connections I have in time. Shanice and the others trust me as much as they can trust a homeless man, and Andre needs guidance on protecting those already arrested." After intense debate, the Bureau reluctantly agreed to Marcus's return under strict conditions: daily check-ins, emergency extraction protocols, and a direct line to a tactical team positioned just outside Oak Ridge. Before departing, Marcus received urgent medical treatment, tactical supplies disguised as homeless provisions, and updated intelligence on department movements. His return to Oak Ridge required extreme caution. The department had distributed his description to all officers, describing him as an armed and dangerous drug dealer who had assaulted police. Marcus altered his appearance further, allowing a different facial hair pattern, adopting a pronounced limp he previously hadn't used, and utilizing makeup techniques to appear older and more weathered. He established a new sleeping location away from his previous haunts, emerging only at night to avoid detection. His first priority was connecting with Andre Williams, the only person who partially knew his true purpose. Their meeting occurred in the basement of Andre's church, with elaborate precautions to ensure they weren't followed. "They're rushing cases through the system," Andre reported, spreading out court documents across a folding table. Judge Carpenter is denying bail for everyone arrested at Good Shepherd, citing community safety concerns. Shanice remains in isolation with limited legal access. Marcus provided guidance on legal strategies, identifying procedural violations, and suggesting motions that would delay proceedings until the federal case could be assembled. Focus on chain of custody issues with the evidence, he advised. And file emergency petitions regarding Shanice's isolation. It violates multiple precedents regarding pretrial detention conditions. As they developed legal counter-strategies, Marcus continued his intelligence gathering. The department's corruption had expanded beyond targeting individuals to systematic community displacement. Through careful surveillance of City Hall, he discovered Mayor Richard Thomas was working with real estate developers to condemn and redevelop the Eastern District, replacing affordable housing with luxury condominiums. The police department served as the mechanism for this gentrification, systematically harassing residents, conducting questionable inspections, and creating documentation of high-crime areas that justified redevelopment. Marcus infiltrated a private meeting between Mayor Thomas Chief Hansen and executives from Platinum Development Group by posing as a janitorial worker in the building. Hidden in a maintenance closet adjacent to the conference room, he recorded their explicit discussion of cleaning up the Eastern District by removing undesirable elements, thinly veiled references to the black community. The police department has been invaluable in preparing the neighborhood for transition, Thomas told the developers. Property values are dropping precisely where we need acquisitions, and most troublemakers are now tied up in the legal system. The recording provided crucial evidence connecting political corruption to the department's targeted harassment. Despite his enhanced precautions, Marcus experienced several near discoveries. Officer Wilson nearly spotted him while Marcus was documenting a patrol car stopping a group of black teenagers without cause. A local shopkeeper who had seen his wanted photo began to call the station before Marcus created a distraction that allowed him to disappear. Each close call reinforced the danger, yet also provided opportunities to document continued civil rights violations. Marcus's most significant achievement during this phase came through an anonymous tip to a state judge outside the corrupt local network. Using evidence gathered during his station escape, he provided documentation of Shanice's unlawful detention conditions. The resulting judicial inquiry forced the department to release her from isolation, creating an opportunity for Marcus to establish indirect communication through coded messages passed via Andre. When they finally managed a brief, secret meeting behind the abandoned paper mill, Shanice's physical condition alarmed him. She had lost weight during her detention, and bruising on her wrists evidenced rough handling. Yet her determination remained unbroken. They wanted me to sign a statement promising to cease all community organizing in exchange for dropped charges, she explained. I told them I'd rather serve the full sentence. Their conversation necessarily remained brief, but in those few moments, Marcus struggled profoundly with his continued deception. Every instinct urged him to reveal his true identity, to explain that her courage had inspired him through months of hardship, that help was coming. Instead, he maintained his cover while providing actionable intelligence about the department's plans and vulnerabilities. As they parted ways, Shanice surprised him by taking his weathered hand in hers. "Whatever you are," she said softly. "Whatever you're really doing here, thank you." The moment crystallized everything at stake, not just a case, but human lives, dignity, and a community's future. The investigation's final phase began when the department implemented what they called Operation Community Safety, essentially martial law conditions in the Eastern District. Checkpoints appeared at neighborhood entrances, officers conducted random searches without warrants, and a curfew was selectively enforced against black residents. Chief Hansen held a press conference describing these measures as necessary responses to the drug crisis, a crisis his own department had helped manufacture through selective enforcement and evidence planting. From his hidden observation points, Marcus documented countless constitutional violations, transmitting evidence directly to the FBI team preparing for intervention. His handler confirmed they were nearly ready. 72 hours to position assets. Continue gathering evidence, but minimize exposure. For Marcus, who had witnessed months of injustice, those 72 hours represented an eternity for a community under siege. Yet he understood the necessity a premature move would risk allowing the corrupt officials to escape justice. As Operation Community Safety intensified, the stage was set for the final confrontation. Chief Hansen's voice boomed through the press conference microphones, his silver hair catching the light as cameras flashed. Today marks the beginning of our enhanced Community Crime Suppression Initiative, he announced, standing flanked by Mayor Thomas and uniformed officers. We will no longer allow criminal elements to hold this community hostage. The carefully crafted public relations effort masked the reality Marcus observed from his hidden vantage point across the street. This was nothing less than militarized occupation of the black community. Within hours, SWAT teams deployed throughout the Eastern District conducting warrantless searches under the guise of community safety inspections. Marcus documented officers entering homes without consent, rifling through personal belongings, while residents stood frightened in their own living rooms. Children were made to wait outside, regardless of weather. Elderly residents were denied access to medication during searches, and any questioning of procedures was met with threats of arrest for obstruction. From his concealed position near Maple Street, Marcus recorded Officer Wilson forcing a young mother to stand in the rain with her infant, while his team ransacked her apartment, finding nothing but proceeding to cite her for unrelated code violations that would later be used in eviction proceedings. This wasn't law enforcement. It was systematic intimidation designed to break community resistance. Despite the increased police presence, Shanice managed to organize community response through a network of church basements and private homes. Marcus observed her leadership with admiration, noting how she helped residents document violations, coordinated legal support through Andre, and maintained morale despite overwhelming pressure. They want us scared, divided, and ready to leave, she told a group gathered in Good Shepherd's basement. But this has been our home for generations, and we won't be driven out. Marcus provided tactical advice through carefully structured anonymous notes, helping the community establish communication systems that avoided police surveillance. His FBI training proved invaluable in creating counter-surveillance methods that allowed community leaders to move and meet without detection. Through careful infiltration of the police station's administrative area, posing as part of a cleaning crew with forged credentials, Marcus discovered files proving that 3 recent suicides of black men in custody were actually murders. The documentation showed Officer Wilson and Sergeant Cooper had been alone with each victim before their deaths, with autopsy findings later manipulated by the medical examiner who played golf weekly with Chief Hansen. These weren't just civil rights violations, they were capital crimes being systematically covered up. Marcus transmitted this evidence immediately, adding urgency to the federal response. His handler's message that evening was both encouraging and frustrating. Strike team in final position. Need 48 more hours to coordinate with Justice Department and secure necessary authorizations. Maintain extreme caution. 2 more days of community suffering before intervention could begin. The situation escalated dramatically the following morning. During a raid on an apartment complex on Roosevelt Avenue, Officer Wilson pursued a 12-year-old black boy who ran from the police presence out of fear. The chase ended with Wilson tackling Deshaun Robinson, the same teenager Marcus had helped escape months earlier, with such force that the boy's head struck a concrete planter. Blood pooled beneath him as Wilson handcuffed the unconscious child, shouting about resisting arrest. Marcus documented the entire incident, including Wilson's deliberate delay in calling medical assistance. When Deshaun's parents arrived at the scene, they were themselves detained for interfering with police business. while their son was loaded into an ambulance, his condition critical. News of Deshawn's injury spread through the community like wildfire. Years of pent-up frustration, fear, and righteous anger crystallized around this latest injustice. Spontaneous protests formed near the police cordon points, with residents demanding accountability and an end to the occupation. Marcus observed the growing tension with concern, knowing that any civil unrest would be met with disproportionate force, potentially delaying federal intervention. His fears proved justified when the department deployed in riot gear, using the protests as justification for even more aggressive tactics. Officers fired rubber bullets and tear gas into crowds that included elderly residents and children. Marcus documented Cooper instructing his team to target anyone recording police actions, creating a media blackout, except for the department's official narrative of restoring order against rioters. The escalating chaos provided Marcus with critical documentation opportunities. From various vantage points, he recorded clear civil rights violations, peaceful protesters being beaten, journalists detained without charges, medical volunteers prevented from treating the injured. Each incident strengthened the federal case, while simultaneously increasing the urgency for intervention. Among the chaos, Marcus spotted Shanice moving through the community, urging nonviolent resistance and helping the injured. Her courage in the face of overwhelming force embodied everything he had come to admire about Oak Ridge's Eastern District residents: resilience, dignity, and unbreakable community bonds. The protests reached their zenith outside the police station, where hundreds gathered demanding Deshawn's condition and the release of those detained during the demonstrations. Chief Hansen appeared briefly promising full investigation of any validated complaints, while visibly directing officers to identify community leaders in the crowd for later targeting. Marcus witnessed Cooper and Franklin reviewing footage explicitly selecting Shanice and other organizers for arrest once the crowd dispersed. The breaking point came during what appeared to be a strategic retreat by police forces. As protesters cautiously celebrated what they believed was successful pressure, Marcus observed sniper positions being established on surrounding rooftops. Through enhanced audio surveillance equipment, he captured Cooper's radio instructions. Once crowd begins dispersing, detain primary targets. Use maximum force if necessary. Carpenter has approved expedited processing for all arrests. The retreat was actually a trap designed to capture community leadership when their guard was down. Most alarming was a conversation between Wilson and another officer near Marcus's observation position. "Chief says Shanice Taylor has become too much trouble," Wilson muttered. "If she resists arrest even slightly, make sure she doesn't make it to booking. Understand?" The other officer nodded, patting his sidearm. The implicit authorization for lethal force against Shanice represented a line that could not be crossed. Marcus faced the most difficult decision of his career: maintain his cover to preserve the larger case, or break it to save Shanice's life. As the police began their coordinated move to ensnare the protest leaders, Marcus watched Wilson and 3 officers specifically targeting Shanice's position. Her back was turned as she helped an elderly man affected by tear gas. Wilson's hand moved to his weapon as he approached. In that moment, the choice became clear. The case was important, but no collection of evidence was worth a human life, particularly not the life of someone who had fought so bravely for justice. Marcus moved decisively, his homeless persona discarded as he sprinted toward Shanice with the speed and precision of his FBI training. Everything was about to change. "FBI, get down!" Marcus shouted, his voice commanding and entirely unlike the mumbling homeless man Oak Ridge had known for months. He tackled Shanice to the ground, just as Wilson drew his weapon, shielding her body with his own, as chaos erupted around them. "What the—" Wilson's confusion gave Marcus the crucial seconds needed to reveal his credentials. "Special Agent Marcus Jenkins, Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're targeting a civilian with deadly force, Officer Wilson. Lower your weapon immediately." The shock rippling through the officers was palpable. Wilson froze, his training momentarily overridden by the sudden revelation. Cooper, witnessing from 20 yards away, made a different calculation. He turned and ran toward the station, obviously intent on destroying evidence. The crowd fell silent, the unexpected intervention creating a momentary pause in the conflict. Beneath him, Shanice stared up in disbelief, recognition and understanding dawning in her eyes. "You were never homeless," she whispered. "All this time." "I'm sorry for the deception," Marcus replied softly, helping her to her feet while maintaining his vigilance toward the confused officers. "But right now we need to get you to safety." The standoff was broken by the synchronized arrival of FBI tactical teams that had been positioned around Oak Ridge for the past 24 hours. Black SUVs and marked federal vehicles converged on the police station and City Hall simultaneously, while helicopters established overhead surveillance. Agent Chen approached through the crowd, megaphone in hand. "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We are executing federal warrants for civil rights violations and corruption charges. All Oak Ridge Police Department officers are ordered to stand down and surrender their weapons." The operation unfolded with precision born of careful planning. Chief Hansen was taken into custody while attempting to delete server files in his office. Sergeant Cooper was apprehended trying to flee through the station's rear exit. Judge Carpenter was arrested during an emergency meeting with Mayor Thomas. Both men handcuffed, while federal agents secured documents they had been hastily shredding. Most satisfying to Marcus was personally placing Wilson under arrest, reading him his rights, while the officer who had brutalized so many stared in stunned disbelief. The only major figure not immediately apprehended was Lieutenant Franklin, who had disappeared minutes before the raid began. As federal agents secured the station, Marcus noticed Officer Sarah Miller standing apart from her colleagues, her expression conflicted. Approaching her carefully, he made a calculated assessment. "Lieutenant Franklin is missing. You know where he's going, don't you?" Miller hesitated, the weight of years of complicity visibly shifting on her shoulders. "Evidence warehouse on County Line Road," she finally said. "There's a room in the back with everything, the real records, the trophy collection, the videos they made of the interrogations. He'll destroy it all." Her cooperation led to Franklin's capture and the preservation of crucial evidence. In exchange for her testimony, Miller received consideration during sentencing, the only officer to do so. The federal presence transformed Oak Ridge overnight. FBI evidence recovery teams processed the station, while Justice Department officials interviewed released detainees. Medical teams treated those injured during the protests, and community leaders were brought into direct consultation regarding immediate needs. Marcus, finally receiving proper medical attention for months of accumulated injuries and untreated illness, supervised the evidence collection while providing initial testimony for the case being built. The grand jury proceedings began within days, held in the federal courthouse in the state capitol to ensure impartiality. Marcus testified for nearly 15 hours across 3 days, presenting the overwhelming evidence he had gathered during his undercover operation. Photographs, video recordings, financial records, and seized department documents painted an undeniable picture of systematic civil rights abuses motivated by racial animus and financial corruption. When Miller took the stand as a cooperating witness, her testimony confirmed everything Marcus had documented while adding crucial insider perspective on the department's operations. "We had explicit instructions to target black residents," she testified. "Promotions, favorable assignments, even overtime opportunities were tied to arrest numbers in the Eastern District. Any officer who questioned these practices was assigned to desk duty or night shifts until they complied." The grand jury indicted 23 individuals, 15 officers, including all command staff, Judge Carpenter, Mayor Thomas, the county medical examiner, and 5 private citizens involved in the corruption network. The charges ranged from civil rights violations and evidence tampering to conspiracy racketeering, and in the cases of Wilson and Cooper, second-degree murder for the deaths classified as suicides in custody. The community's reaction mixed relief with lingering anger about how long the abuses had been allowed to continue. At a town hall meeting in Good Shepherd Church, now packed beyond capacity with residents and media, Marcus faced difficult questions about the FBI's timing and methods. "Why did it take so long?" demanded Lamar Johnson, whose son's death had gone uninvestigated. "How many people suffered while you gathered your evidence?" Marcus acknowledged the painful reality behind the question. "The system failed you long before I arrived," he admitted. "And while I needed time to build a case that would ensure justice every day of that investigation, I witnessed suffering that should never have happened. There's no excuse for how long these abuses were allowed to continue." The honesty of his response resonated with many, though the community's wounds would take much longer to heal than any investigation or trial. His most difficult conversation came with Shanice, who had requested a private meeting at her community center. When Marcus arrived, now dressed in his proper FBI attire rather than tattered clothes, the contrast highlighted the deception that had defined their relationship. "For months I trusted you." She began, her voice steady, despite the hurt evident in her eyes. "Shared community strategies with you. Treated your injuries. And all that time you were someone else entirely." "Not entirely," Marcus responded carefully. "My purpose was different than you knew, but everything you saw of my character was real. My commitment to justice, my respect for what you were building here, my—" He hesitated, personal feelings intersecting uncomfortably with professional boundaries. "My admiration for your courage was absolutely genuine." Shanice considered him silently before responding. "I understand why you couldn't reveal yourself, but understanding doesn't immediately heal trust." The painful conversation gradually evolved into a discussion of Oak Ridge's future. With the corrupt power structure dismantled, the community had an unprecedented opportunity to rebuild governance based on equity and transparency. Shanice's documentation of abuses combined with Marcus's evidence created a comprehensive roadmap of necessary reforms. The justice system's reckoning with Oak Ridge's corruption took more than 18 months. The FBI's thorough investigation led to review of over 700 convictions potentially tainted by falsified evidence or testimony. Hundreds of wrongfully convicted individuals, predominantly black residents, were released with federal compensation for their unjust imprisonment. Officer Wilson and Sergeant Cooper received the harshest sentences, 30 years for civil rights violations, resulting in death. Chief Hanson, Mayor Thomas, and Judge Carpenter each received 15 to 20 years for their roles in the conspiracy. Lieutenant Franklin's attempted evidence destruction added obstruction charges to his already substantial sentence. Throughout the trials and aftermath, Marcus remained in Oak Ridge, serving as the FBI's liaison to the community during the transition. His role evolved from undercover operative to public servant, working directly with residents to establish new accountability systems for law enforcement. The Department of Justice implemented a consent decree requiring comprehensive reforms, independent oversight, and community participation in policing decisions. 1 year after the arrests, Marcus received an unexpected job offer leadership of a newly established FBI Civil Rights Division, specializing in investigating police misconduct nationwide. The position would allow him to apply the lessons from Oak Ridge on a broader scale, identifying and addressing similar patterns across the country. When he shared the news with Shanice, now serving on the Civilian Oversight Board for Oak Ridge's restructured police department, she surprised him with her response. "They couldn't find anyone better," she said, genuine warmth returning to her smile. "But only if you'll accept a community partnership component. Places like Oak Ridge exist everywhere, and they need advocates who understand both sides of the system." Marcus agreed immediately, recognizing the wisdom in her proposal. Within months, they established a joint program training community organizers and federal agents to work collaboratively on civil rights enforcement. Their professional partnership gradually healed the breach of trust, evolving into friendship, and eventually something deeper, a relationship built on shared commitment to justice and honest communication. The epilogue to Oak Ridge's transformation came 3 years after Marcus first arrived as a homeless man. Standing at the podium during the dedication of the new Community Justice Center, he surveyed the audience, former defendants, now serving as community leaders, reformed officers, committed to constitutional policing, federal officials and residents from all parts of town. Most meaningful was Shanice beside him, now his partner in both personal and professional life. What happened in Oak Ridge wasn't unique, Marcus told the gathered crowd. What makes this community special is how you've rebuilt from tragedy, creating accountability where there was corruption, healing where there was harm, and unity where there was division. The journey isn't complete, but today we celebrate how far you've come. As he stepped away from the microphone, Deshaun Robinson, now recovered and heading to college on a scholarship, approached with a question that captured the essence of everything Marcus had fought for. Do you think other cities can do what we did here, make real change happen? Marcus looked to Shanice before answering, drawing strength from her unwavering belief in possibility. Yes, he replied with absolute conviction. As long as there are people willing to stand for truth even when it's dangerous. As long as communities refuse to be divided. As long as we remember that justice isn't just an ideal, it's something we build together every day through countless acts of courage. What do you think is the most important lesson from Marcus and Shanice's story? Was it the power of community resilience, the importance of accountability in law enforcement, or perhaps how a single person's dedication can spark meaningful change? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice prevailing against corruption moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful true stories. Share this video with someone you know who believes in fighting for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most remarkable undercover operations in FBI history. Until next time, remember that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. This powerful story reminds us that systemic racism often hides in plain sight, protected by those sworn to uphold justice. Marcus's journey shows that dismantling corrupt systems requires extraordinary courage, persistence, and strategic action. True change demands both individual heroism and community solidarity. Neither could have succeeded alone. The investigation reveals how racism becomes institutionalized through policies, practices, and cultural norms within organizations, creating parallel systems of justice based on skin color. We learn that documentation is powerful. When oppression is meticulously recorded, it becomes harder to deny. Shanice's community organizing complemented Marcus's official investigation, demonstrating how grassroots activism and institutional authority can work together against injustice. The story also teaches us about the psychological cost of fighting corruption. Marcus sacrificed his comfort, health, and identity, while community members risked everything despite having far less power and protection. Perhaps most importantly, we learn that justice is not inevitable. It requires people willing to stand firm against overwhelming odds, making difficult choices when easier paths are available. Real change happens not through grand gestures, but through daily acts of courage from ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice. What forms of systemic racism have you witnessed in your own community, and what small steps could you take to address them? I believe every one of us has the power to make a difference, just like Marcus and Shanice did in their own ways. If this story moved you or opened your eyes to how systemic racism operates within institutions, please hit the like button to help it reach others who need to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate those fighting against it. Share this video with someone who might need inspiration to stand up against discrimination in their own life. Your support helps us continue creating content that shines a light on difficult truths while offering hope for a more just future. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most remarkable undercover operations against racist policing in American history.